Today on Inspired Money.
I think personal finance actually is pretty simple. Even investing is pretty basic. If you have an afternoon, you can pretty much learn how to invest as a personal, beginner investor. It really is the psychology and the habits and the behavior that trip us up. The basics are easy to learn. I mean, there are people trying to teach it to elementary school kids, so it's not that difficult. The difficult part of it just comes with being human and trying to work against your impulses and trying to do the healthy thing in the long term for you, even though the thing in the short term feels better.
This is episode 49 with freelance writer and author of the book Get Money, Kristin Wong. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. If it's your first time here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Inspired Money is different from other personal finance podcasts because we don't want to just learn how to live with money. We want to put money and inspiration together so that we can live richer lives, make a greater impact, and make the world a better place. In addition to listening, I could use your help. If you have feedback, ideas, or just want to say hi, visit our Facebook group by typing inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook into your browser. Come check it out and interact with the growing Inspired Money community. Now let's get to the show. Today we're talking with Kristin Wong. She's a full-time freelance writer, so you may have read her stuff in the New York Times, The Cut, Glamour magazine. She's written and produced videos for MSN Living. She co-wrote a Fox digital web series that lived on Netflix. As a personal finance expert, she's known for helping people to learn about money in a way that's actually accessible, which translates into a way that's not boring and full of jargon. Her first book, Get Money, Live the Life You Want, Not Just the Life You Can Afford, hit shelves in March of this year. In this episode, you'll learn Kristin's path chasing a writing career, from technical to entertainment to personal finance, how viewing success as a process can lead to fulfillment, and then we talk about a whole bunch of things: money, budgeting, using gratitude as a tool for productivity, and a whole lot more. Now let's get inspired with Kristin Wong. Kristin, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
I love this question because I feel like it's so telling of how, our earliest memories of money is telling of how we deal with it. And for me, my earliest childhood memory of money was sitting in a closet in a one-bedroom apartment with my mom. We lived in your standard impoverished kind of high crime neighborhood. And we didn't have a lot of money. And I was kind of digging through her shoe boxes as kids like to do, just playing dress up. And I found a crisp $100 bill. And, as a kid, I didn't even know $100 bill was a thing. It was like if you were an adult and somebody tells you you hear about $1 million bill, then you actually see one. You're like, I didn't know this was real. So I came across this and I remember shouting, "Oh my God, $100!" And my mom just immediately put her hand over my mouth and she shushed me and said, "You want the whole neighborhood to hear? You want someone to come rob us?" And that it was one of my earliest memories, period. But it was just such a substantial memory for me. And it was the first time, I guess, I realized that money was this thing that somebody could take away from you. I had this idea in my head that, I think that's when I first had this idea that money was scarce. And so that just kind of always stuck with me.
Then there's the saying that children should be seen, not heard. Is there sort of an element of that with the money too? Because you got shushed for announcing that you found this $100 bill.
Yeah, my mom would probably agree with you. But yeah, it was It was a strange experience because, I mean, I always knew that money was valuable. Of course, you know these things when you're a kid, but like, it was the first time I realized like, oh, you have to be quiet about it. So I was, and I love my mom. I don't want to call my mom out for any of this, but it was the first time I realized that money is taboo and money is something that can be taken from you. And it was like the first time all of these connotations, these really negative connotations with money were imprinted on me. And of course, I didn't realize that at the time, but like growing up now and thinking about money and thinking about what my earliest childhood memory of money was, I think like, why was that impressionable to me? And then I've come to realize, well, it's because of all these things, right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that whether you had money or you didn't have money, I think it's kind of universal that people don't speak enough about this subject. It is taboo. People are not comfortable. And that's why all too often people ignore their money or their finances. And that's sort of one of the missions that you've been on as an author, as a writer. I mean, you're trying to solve that problem for everybody.
Yeah, I like talking about things that are supposed to be taboo, I guess, because I feel like, especially with money, when something is taboo and you're not supposed to talk about it, then it makes it very difficult to learn about it. In school we talk about sex, we have sex ed, but we don't really ever talk about money, even as adults. It's sort of this thing that you're not supposed to ask people how much they make. You're definitely not supposed to ask how much they have saved. And yet those conversations can lead to really enlightening lessons about money. I remember, just talking to my friends recently about retirement. I sort of, they came to realize like how much they should be saving for retirement. So we could have these really productive conversations that you can't have if you are not supposed to talk about money. And especially like when it comes to making money, like how much can you ask for it? As a writer, I have a lot of friends who are writers who have no idea how much to even ask for with a client. So they often undervalue themselves. But when I can share here's how much I've made with them, and other people can share, here's how much I've made doing the same kind of work, you sort of get the conversation going and you can make more. When you talk about something, it's just so much easier to learn about. It's almost oppressive to not be able to talk about money because then it's a surefire way to make sure you never learn about it and you keep staying in the same situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. When is it that you realized that you wanted to be a writer?
I've always been a writer. And even when I was little, I was, writing stories to communicate the crazy thoughts that go bouncing around in my head and hope that somebody can relate to them. I write to tell a story, I write to solve problems. And writing about money was a way for me to solve my problems. So that's sort of why I started writing about it. Is say 6 years ago when I first started writing essays for money at Get Rich Slowly, J.D. Roth's blog, I was reading his blog and I was very fascinated with how other people were dealing with money, and I was trying to get better at it. And so then I started writing essays about my own relationship with money and how I was dealing with it and the lessons I was learning with it. And I kind of just wrote my way to understanding it, And after writing about it for 5 or 6 years now, you learn a thing or two about money. And I started writing for other outlets, and they would ask me, hey, you do such a good job of like explaining these complicated, often boring financial topics. Can you write about them for us? But the funny thing is, like, when I write about 401ks or when I write about student debt or something like that, people don't want me to just write the facts. Like these media outlets place that I write for, they want me to tell it in a story, because I think like stories resonate more with people than like just dry information. So that's what I was writing about from the beginning. And when I wrote the book, it was like, I have all this knowledge about money in my head that I've learned over the years. It would be a shame to not share it with people and to not just put it out there in a way that's relatable, So that's what I did. That's how I started writing, and that's how I started writing about money.
I'm curious if you look back to 6 years ago when you first started writing for J.D. Roth, since it was very personal. You were writing about your relationship with money. How has your relationship with money changed?
Well, back then, I was really stuck in what I would later learn is known as the scarcity mindset. I was afraid of, I wasn't really trying to make more money. I was just trying to not lose the money I already had. So I was very obsessed with topics like saving money and being frugal, which is great. But my relationship with money was a fear-based one. I was afraid of it. I thought of it as something almost evil, something that, you know, if you were rich, that meant you were greedy. I had very negative associations with it. And it wasn't, and I did okay with money. Like, I was good at saving it and stuff. But as the years went on, the more that I learned about it, you know, my mindset sort of changed from scarcity to abundance, where I realized, you know, if I'm not so scared of losing money, I can take these risks. I can do these things. I'm in a better place psychologically to do things that are going to help my money grow. And investing is a good example of that. You know, I was terrified of investing because I was afraid, like, of, you know, it's kind of scary to put your money even in a mutual fund, an index fund, and put it in the stock market, because I'm like, it could go up, it could go down. I have no idea. You know, of course, in the long run, it goes up, but, you know, you don't really know that until you do it. So yeah, that was a really big mindset shift for me, was not operating from a place of just trying to keep what I already have, but operating from a place of I'm grateful for what I have, but I still want more. Does that make sense?
But I think that sometimes it sounds easier than reality. How did you make it happen?
For me, it sounds cheesy, but for me, what really helped shift my mindset from one of scarcity to abundance was gratitude. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy, and it's like, oh, how is gratitude going to help you, like, change your situation? But I think gratitude is when you are legitimately appreciative of what you have, even if it's something very small, even if it's not a lot. That sort of gives you the mental and emotional bandwidth when you are grateful and you think, you know, everything's okay, to pursue more. But in a way, I think that's sort of a privileged thing to be able to say, like, just be grateful for what you have. Because obviously, if you have more to be grateful for. You know, actually, probably the most grateful and appreciative people I've met are the people who have endured the most, because I think they know that it can always be worse, you know. But I think it's important either way, because when you're happy with what you have, and when you know that there's good reason to be alive, and there's good reason to keep striving for other things, it makes it so much easier to strive for other things, because you're operating from a place of optimism and you know, appreciation, instead of one that's like, I don't have enough. And instead of focusing on what you don't have, you're focused on what you do have. So it's much easier to make that shift when you are grateful. And somebody gave me the advice of, like, just list 3 things every day that you're grateful for. Just 3 simple things. It can be, you know, seeing a full moon. It can be, you know, a cup of coffee in the morning, something as simple as that. And if you do that for, you know, 30 days, it really changes your mindset.
I'm going to have to try that for sure. Now, getting back to your unique path as a writer, I noticed that your career path has included a very diverse writing jobs. You were a technical writer, you were in entertainment, and then you went into personal finance. Is that just the path of a writer trying to make money?
I think it's a path of somebody who's trying to make money doing what they like in general and finding that balance. You know, I'd be lying if I said I didn't write about things that I didn't want to write about. You know, I would be lying if I said that I've always gotten to write exactly what I've wanted to write about. Some of it has been just to make money. But for the most part, I try to follow what my interests are. And when I was a technical writer, that was primarily just to make money. But I also, you know, I could have taken any other job, but I wanted to be a writer. And that was the writing job that I could find. And then I sort of moved on from there, and I wanted to pursue screenwriting. So I moved to Los Angeles, and I did that for a while, and realized that while I liked saying that, hey, I'm writing for this show, and hey, I've gotten to write this series for Netflix, while I liked bragging about those things, really, I didn't enjoy doing them day to day. And so I gave that up, and I quit. I realized people would be more impressed if I told them, hey, I'm a screenwriter, than if I told them, hey, I'm writing essays about personal finance, right? You know, part of it is trying to make a living, but also part of it is letting go of what other people think and just writing about the things that make me feel good, whatever it is, you know?
And emotionally, what did it take to go from full-time employment to writing as a freelancer and having that flexibility?
Well, it was a very clear-cut decision where I was like, I am leaving Texas, where I was a technical writer in Houston. That was primarily the reason why that was the writing job I could find, was technical writing, because those are the writing jobs that exist there. And I wanted to move to Los Angeles or New York or, a big city where I could first just get it. Like, I had never lived anywhere else before. So I wanted that, but I also wanted to try to do some kind of creative writing. And so it was a very conscious decision and it was a very calculated decision where I was like, I know that, as much as I'm saying, embrace the abundance mindset, I also knew that it was going to be very hard for me to just go out there and try to do that. Yeah. So for me, it really was, when I made that shift, I actually saved for it. And that saving for it, I had an emergency fund, and then I had I moved from Texas to California. So I had a fund that I called what if I can't find a job fund? And that was going to hold me over for 6 months while I looked for work here in LA. And having that money it sort of gave me the freedom and flexibility to pursue the thing that I wanted to pursue, which was screenwriting, without having to worry about money. Because I heard so many stories of people who come to LA and they can't find work and they end up doing something they don't like. And I'm like, that would put me right back where I started. I don't want to do that. So I, part of taking that leap, which was scary, was the idea that what if I'm, I don't want to be 50 and look back and say, I never tried this thing. So that was the number one motivator, was I don't want to look back and think what could have been. But the second thing that helped me really was having that financial stability and that cushion, and that's not to say if you don't have that, you shouldn't pursue your dreams, but it's just what helped me, because it gave me the mental bandwidth to be able to go and do the thing that I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes when people are making a big move, they tell everybody, because that's their way of pushing themselves beyond the point of being able to chicken out. But you actually did a little bit of the opposite, in that you didn't tell everyone until you had LA funding money saved up before you went, and then you announced it.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I operate. And to be honest, it's kind of a pride thing. I don't like to talk about things that I'm working on. I like to talk about when I know that it's going to happen, then I tell people, because I don't want to be known for being that person who says she's going to do things and then she doesn't do them, But that's actually something that I've had to get over, being a freelance writer and having my own business and doing things like that. Sometimes you do need that accountability, and sometimes you do work on things and they don't work out, and, you fail at things, and that's just how it goes. And I kind of had to get over that pride of wanting to be that person who just tells, you know what I'm saying? I wanted to be that person who's like, you have no idea that she's working on this magic behind the scenes, and then you just hear about it. But that to me is pride talking. And, it worked back then because it was kind of a crazy thing. And I was a bit unsure about it. I'm like, I don't know if this is really going to happen, but let me just save this money. And then once I did, I was like, okay, then now I'm going to tell people, because I'm going to do this and I'm sure about it.
Well, I think the valuable lesson there is that it's preparation. It's about making the proper preparation so that when you take the leap, you can fully do it and you have the flexibility. You're not in this desperate state that you had to find a paying job right away, in which case you might settle for something less than what was your dream, to be a writer.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to avoid. I didn't want to just put myself back in the same situation, that I was in Texas, where I was working at a job that I was okay and I liked it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. So I thought, if I'm going to be taking this time and making this giant leap to do what I want to do in my life, I want to set myself up for success as much as I possibly can.
So you made the big move. You were dreaming about becoming a screenwriter. You did get a job in entertainment. You were writing comedy. And you mentioned earlier that you didn't really love it. what were the things that you didn't like and that spurned a change?
The main thing I didn't like was that it wasn't fun. Like you think writing comedy, when I think of writing comedy, I think of just being in a room full of writers and we're riffing off of each other and we're making these jokes. And that's not really how it was. It was very much like, this is where the humor goes in. It was very formulaic and really unpleasant for me. And just the industry itself, I didn't enjoy it. And honestly, I like writing alone. And the format of like screenwriting just isn't for me. And I can totally see how people would enjoy that. But in my experience, I didn't enjoy just working in the industry, but I also didn't enjoy just I'm not the kind of writer for whom screenwriting brings out my best writing. I think I just kind of suck at it, to be honest. And I realized like, I'm not as good at this as like my peers are. And I have no desire to really get better at it. And I feel like the entertainment industry is notoriously hard to break into. And if you have no desire to get better, well, you're probably not going to succeed in it. So it was something, and then I realized I was only doing it because I really just didn't want people to think I was a failure. So I was making myself miserable. I kept on going to these screenwriting classes that I didn't enjoy. I kept feeling resentful while I was doing this. And I got tired of it. And I realized, like, I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I'm going to do what is good for me.
Definitely seems like the outward success versus inward success, right? Having that reflection and realization and doing something about it, which is probably scary to do.
Yeah, it really was, because I do think some of my friends thought I was a failure. Maybe some of them still do. I had screenwriting friends that I knew it was like, when I see them in public somewhere in LA and they're asked, what are you working on? That's the thing that people always ask, what are you working on? And I tell them like, oh, I wrote a personal finance book. They're probably going to be like, oh, poor Kristin. She couldn't make it in the industry. And that's just, I have to deal with that. That's fine. That to me, it sucks. Sure. Of course, I want to be well respected and loved. But to me, it's not worth that validation, that outward, that success validation from others is less valuable to me than enjoying what I do day to day, And there are certain metrics for success that are important to me. And those are the ones that I try to savor. I've written something for the New York Times. I try to savor that. I have my book coming out. I see it in a bookstore. I try to savor that. And those metrics of success kind of make up for it, But yeah, certainly it was hard to get over that outward ideal of being this person who went to LA and she is writing for, television. But yeah, I had to give that up.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that some of those friends in the entertainment business, many of them, as we were saying, so many of us don't handle our finances well, or we don't talk about money enough. So many of them may be reading your book and ultimately getting some education and some help from your writings.
That would be nice. That would be awesome.
So when you made that leap, you started writing for J.D. Roth. You were writing for blogs. I know that you have since been published in the New York Times, which I think I saw very recently. You have something in the travel section. So congratulations once again. What advice do you have for freelancers and content creators? Because I noticed in your book, Get Money, Live the Life You Want, Not Just the Life You Can Afford, that's one of the themes that you set out early on, that we're in this gig economy and the economy and way that we do business today is changing.
It's very strange because on the one hand, I feel like, the economy is changing and something by like, there's going to be 40% of the workforce is going to be freelance by 2020 or something. There are going to be more freelancers than full-time employees eventually. And on the one hand, I think, well, that really sucks for people who need to find 9-to-5 jobs and they're not necessarily, built for the freelance life. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of money to be made out there. I make a decent income as a freelance writer, words I never thought would come out of my mouth. And I know writers who make a lot more than I do. I know other artists and, other freelancers who make a lot more than I do. And people are thriving in this economy. People are struggling in it, but people are also thriving in it. One thing I would say is if you do decide to make the leap to freelance, working for yourself, don't go in with the expectation that it's going to somehow solve all of your problems. I think a lot of times we see these headlines that are like, this woman left her soul fucking job to work for herself. And working for yourself can be just as soul sucking. You worry about social media metrics, you worry about building an email list, you worry about all these like sort of silly metrics that can really kind of crush your soul. And I think, I stay in bed at night and I worry about my business. And when I was a 9-to-5 employee, I stayed in bed at night and I worried about my work. So it's not something that's going to solve all your problems. There are certainly some fulfilling things about working for yourself. You do kind of get to make your own schedule, and you can go grocery shopping during the day, and you have more freedom and flexibility. But for the most part, if you want to be a writer, you want to, pursue this dream and take that leap, I would say just don't expect your lifestyle to kind of change that drastically. I think you really have to do it because you like the work.
So it's all about motivation and what's driving you, because you need that to get you through the tough days, since they're not all easy.
Yeah, like during those tough days when I'm like up at night because I'm like, I don't have enough social media followers to go to this conference, for whatever reason, you do have to care about these things, whether it's like there's the conference that wants you to speak, but you don't have enough social media followers and they're worried about it, or like even my book sales. I'm like, I don't know if I'm selling enough. Like things like that keep me awake at night. During those moments, I ask for like, well, the real reason that I'm doing this is I like to write, communicate my ideas, and I like to spend my days doing that. And then you take a step back from all of this minutia and kind of focus on why I started doing this in the first place, which is I like to sit in my office behind my computer with a cup of coffee and just write about something.
Yeah, so let's get into your book a little bit. When you set out to write the book, who is it for and what do you want the reader to do?
Well, the book is for anybody who's interested, anybody I would say who maybe has discretionary income for the first time and doesn't really know what to do with it. It's for anybody who knows that they need to get their financial life in order, but they're not really sure how to go about it. So the book tells you, the basics of personal finance, but it's also very habit and behavior driven. So it's focused on how to feel like in control of your finances, because I think that is the main thing that keeps most of us from actually taking action with our money is like, we don't feel in control of it. We don't feel like we're going to be able to move the needle at all. So the book is designed to make you feel increasingly more powerful. It starts with these very small wins, and then gradually as you get through the book, you hopefully feel more and more encouraged and more motivated to take action and keep going with your money. So what I really hope that people will do with the book is it's a very interactive book. It is meant to be written in. There are assignments. There's even a website that goes along with it. So I'm hoping that people will do those assignments and they'll take action and they will pay off their debt and they'll save for an emergency and they'll start saving for retirement, doing all these things that are like overwhelmingly adult grown-up responsibilities, but they feel motivated to do it. And I'm grateful that I've had a handful of readers who have already emailed me and said they've been doing these things. And that's like, speaking of success, to me, that's the biggest metric of success with the book. I don't care how many books I'm selling. I do, but that's not the most important thing to me. The most important thing is that people are actually taking action with it. So if I can help people feel like they can do these, accomplish these money tasks, then that's awesome.
Yeah, I love in the opening chapters, you write that money is not about math, it's about behavior.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people think, if I just make a budget and I crunch the numbers, I'm good. But budget is, I really think like where people go wrong with budgeting is not that they don't know how to create one or they're doing the numbers wrong. It's always about their habits. It's always that you're going to spend more on restaurants than you think you are. So if you can budget with that in mind, and if you can, think of budgeting as like a verb, not a noun. Think of it as an ongoing habit, a thing that you're doing every day. then that's really what it's all about. It's not about the math. Like you can be great at math and bad at money. I am good at money, but I'm terrible at math. People always say like, oh, they don't teach personal finance in schools. They actually do, and there are organizations working on that. One of them is called Jumpstart Coalition, and they bring financial literacy to like elementary schools or high schools, and they help teachers teach it to students. And I talked to the president of Jumpstart, and she said one of their biggest obstacles, besides funding and that sort of thing, one of their biggest obstacles is deciding who is going to teach these courses to begin with, because you don't just have the math teacher teach them. She said, because it's so behavior driven. Like, how do you teach behavior in schools? You know, like you teach math, you teach social sciences, you teach English, but who teaches personal finance when it's so much about habits and behavior? So I thought that was a really interesting point. And it's something that if you're trying to get your money in order, is important to remember, that it's very much about your habits.
Yeah, I love that it takes away the big excuse for all of those who say that I'm not a numbers person, so I don't have to deal with this.
No, I am definitely not a numbers person. If it were about the numbers, I would be in trouble.
So when it comes to behavior, what's the low-hanging fruit, or what are the behaviors that our listener can try to start making changes for the biggest impact?
You know, I would say, aside from like, there's advice like you can call and haggle your bills. You can, call your credit card company and ask if they'll lower your interest rate. Those things are good. But I think really I would just pick one thing. If you need to cut back in your budget, which I think all of us probably can stand to do, chances are if you're listening to this, there is an area of your budget, few areas probably, that you need to cut back on. You need to save a little bit more money. Pick one thing that you can cut back on, one splurge, one thing that you overspend on. Maybe for me, it's restaurants that you want to cut back on. Just focus on saving, $50 extra a month by cutting back on that thing.
Coming up, Kristin talks about adding gamification into your personal finances, money, purpose, and more. But first, it's all about feeling like you're in control of your money.
Saving money by cutting back on things, that's a very easy and accessible way to feel in control of your money. And, in just a month's time or just a week's time, you can actually have extra money in your budget because of your own habits and behavior. And that's really encouraging.
The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/049. You'll find links to our guest, things mentioned in this episode, and we're adding transcripts, so check the website for updates. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Since today Kristin said that talking money is taboo, I'm going to ask you the very inappropriate question. So what's your net worth? Seriously, do you know? Feeling in control of your finances should begin with knowing your bottom line. Gather all of your financial statements, bank accounts, bills, mortgage statement, credit cards, pay stubs, and enter the details into a spreadsheet, financial software program, or just do it the old-fashioned way and write it down. First, list your assets. Those are all the things that you own. Estimate the value of each and add up the total. Include items like money in your bank accounts, the value of your investment accounts, the value of your vehicles, the market value of your home, business interests, personal property like jewelry, art, and furniture. Or if you're like me, that might include musical instruments, and then the cash value of any insurance policies. Second, list your liabilities. That's what you owe, and add up the total. This is likely going to include your mortgage, car loans, credit card balances, and student loans. Third, subtract your liabilities from your assets to determine your personal net worth. Knowing your net worth is a great start to evaluating your financial health. From there, you can start to organize your finances, create a budget, and prioritize paying off debt. If you're not where you'd like to be, don't fret. There are a lot of things that you can do to make changes and improve. Just pat yourself on the back for getting started. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. So I've got a quick announcement. Congratulations to Jody, who won a pair of tickets to Getting the Band Back Together. That's Broadway producer Ken Davenport's new show that kicks off this month. If you haven't listened to Inspired Money episode 40, Lessons from a Broadway Entrepreneur, go check it out. If you entered the contest but didn't win, thank you for trying. I'm hoping there will be an opportunity to do another giveaway soon, so stay tuned. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. Learn more about us and educate yourself for free by subscribing to our blog at inspiredmoney.fm. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong. I love in your book how you include gamification, and it sounds like if you're able to reduce your restaurant spending, even if it's just $50 a month, but those are the small wins, and then you can build upon that. It's like a snowball effect.
Right, exactly. And, if people aren't familiar with the concept of gamification, it's sort of a thing that it's a marketing strategy, really, that a lot of businesses like to use to make you feel motivated to do a task that you don't otherwise want to do. And often that task is like spending money at a certain store, like your grocery store loyalty card is a great example of gamification because you feel like you're earning points when you spend and, you're saving money and then you want to go and you want to spend more money so you can earn more points. And so I kind of used this and I researched it a lot, this concept of gamification I incorporated a lot of elements of it into the book to make readers feel like they are winning at money. So yeah, again, it's all about those small wins and those small behavioral and habit changes that make you feel more in control. Because if you feel more in control and you feel more powerful over your money, you want to maintain that power. So then you make better decisions. You make better financial decisions as a byproduct of wanting to stay financially powerful. So, you want to save money. You're going to want to say no to that splurge because you want to keep your money because you feel in charge and you don't want to lose that feeling.
So in that sense, you think that once people get started and if they can bank a few small wins and then you're on track, it's pretty easy to stay on track and just keep going, keep moving forward.
Say it's easy, but it's definitely easier than just starting from scratch and trying to do everything all at once. I think that's a lot of what turns people off of personal finance is it just seems so overwhelming. Like, my finances are a mess. Where do I even start? But if you can start small and start on just one thing, it's just so much easier to tackle that big giant, right? If you start one small task at a time. So I think that's really key.
Yeah, I think the thing about it, one thing is that it can feel very overwhelming, but you've been writing about personal finance for a long time now. Do you think that it really boils down to something that's pretty simple and not that complicated, as overwhelming as it feels?
I think a lot of it is. I think personal finance actually is pretty simple. Even investing is pretty basic. If you have an afternoon, you can pretty much learn how to invest as a personal, beginner investor. It really is the psychology and the habits and the behavior that trip us up. The basics are easy to learn. I mean, there are people trying to teach it to elementary school kids, so it's not that difficult. The difficult part of it just comes with being human and trying to work against your impulses and trying to do the healthy thing in the long term for you, even though the thing in the short term feels better. So I think that's really where the difficulty comes in.
Right, having discipline to temper the impulses.
Yes, yeah.
Now you talk about money with purpose. Why is that so important?
Well, I think a lot of times when people start getting their money in order, they do it because they think, I just need to be a responsible adult. Like, that's what responsible adults do, and I'm not a kid anymore, and so I need to get my stuff together financially. And that doesn't really serve you, that doesn't do anything for you. So when you are faced with a decision to overspend, you're probably going to overspend because you really have no good reason to say no to the thing. You need to give yourself a reason to say no to something so that you can say yes to something else. So you have to figure out what is the thing that you want to say yes to. That's what a purpose is for your money. That's what having a goal is for your money. I've talked to people and their purpose is like, I just wanted my family to feel secure. That's a good purpose, It's better than like, I just need to be a responsible adult. Like making your family feel secure, that's meaningful to you. Maybe it's travel. For me, it was travel. When I first started like getting my money in order and I paid off my student loan and I realized, hey, I can actually like pay off debt. I can do this money thing. It was because I had a very clear and specific goal, which was I wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to save up $3,000 to go to Europe. I think the clearer you can get on your purpose, the easier it is to stick to your financial goal because you know how much you need to save. And you know why you want to save so that when you are faced with an impulse spending situation, you can say like, no, I'm not going to spend $100 on these jeans because that $100 I can use to go to Europe, a little bit faster. So yeah, that's why you need to have a purpose is if you have a purpose, it's so much easier to make better financial decisions because you have an actual reason that's benefiting you from making a good financial decision.
Right. Having an overarching mission that keeps you on track. That's motivation, and it's about priorities too.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of spending is about priorities. Like I said, restaurants are a thing that I overspend on. They're also a thing that I enjoy spending money on. And the thing is, I also enjoy spending money on travel. Maybe my other goal is like, I want to pay my house off. So you have to ask like, what is most important to you? And just, for me, travel is more important to me than restaurants. So I'm going to try not to spend so much on restaurants so I have more money to spend on travel. And of course, that's just an example. That's my own personal example. Your own expenses will vary, but I think it's important to understand what you value so that you can prioritize your spending accordingly.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when it comes to investing, it's often said that we should follow a discipline rather than emotions. But it sounds like what you're saying is that when it comes to money, we need to connect it to our feelings. We need to talk about core values and identifying what are the things that matter to us, because that's what is going to keep us on track.
I think so. I mean, I think it helps to understand what your emotions are. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to act on them. I think with a lot of, discipline-based habits, like keeping your money in the stock market when it plummets, you do kind of have to ignore your impulses, not necessarily your emotions. You can process your emotions and be like, I'm panicking right now. Panic is probably, not going to be a helpful response to this. That's different than I think acting on your emotions and acting on your impulses. I mean, so much of personal finance is also about balance. Like, I really think like that's one of the core like tenets of learning how to deal with money is like, it's so much about balance. Like you're balancing how you feel right now with how you want to feel in the future. And that requires discipline and that requires logical thinking, I don't know. So much of it is about balance.
Yeah, it sounds like so many other things in our lives, whether it's eating, exercise, everything is about balance, moderation, and being thoughtful about it.
Totally.
Now, I noticed you bring up a link between money and happiness.
Yeah, there are all these studies that show, you always hear money doesn't buy happiness. And there are actually studies that show, well, no, it can. Just because, I think I don't remember where the study came out with, but it was like, it went viral a few years ago. And I was like, the ideal salary for happiness is $72,000, which your happiness increases until you get to $72,000, and then it kind of plateaus. But I think in that study, they talk about there are different types of happiness, right? There's like your day-to-day fulfillment, and then there's your long-term, your overall sort of happiness. And I think money can help you feel better day-to-day because, you don't have to worry about how you're going to get money to pay your bills. You don't have to worry about like, how am I going to be able to put food on the table? When you have money, it's naive to think that so many of your problems are not going to be solved with money. People, my parents used to always say like, money's not going to solve all your problems, but that's also something rich people say because there are problems that I think we don't realize that money will solve. Like if you have trouble paying your rent, money will solve that. So I think, there are certain things that there are certain ways in which money can make you feel more free and less worried about day-to-day stuff. And money can buy you experiences. Money can pay for things that, do make you happy. Money itself is not going to make you happy, but spending time with your friends and your family certainly makes you happy. And when you have money, you can afford to take time off and go on vacation with your family. When you have money, you can afford to go fly across the country to, see your best friend get married. You don't have to think about, oh my God, how am I going to afford that choice? So I do think in a way money does not equal happiness, but it can buy you things that make you happy. I always say at the end of our lives, our regrets are never money related, right? We regret things like not having certain experiences or not spending enough time with our friends or family. Money can get in the way of those things, So when people don't care about money, it's sort of like, well, yes, you do, because you care about all of these things. And unfortunately, money affects those things. So it helps to learn how to use money as a tool to get to the things that bring you joy, get to the things that matter to you more than the money itself.
Do you think your views on money have changed a lot compared to when you were a kid in the high crime neighborhood to today when you're you're a successful freelancer and writer?
Right. Sure, they've changed, like I said, going back to the scarcity versus abundance mindset, they've changed a lot in that way. I feel like I have more freedom and flexibility now. But I think it's important to, sometimes those early habits and that early mindset that I had with money still sticks around. I'm not sure that it will ever go away. I'm still very vigilant with my money. I worry about it, If I lose a freelance client, I revert right back to that scarcity mindset where I'm like, what am I going to do? I got to get my stuff together. Like the sky is going to fall. So in some ways, my mindset hasn't really changed that much. It's just sort of actively trying to remind myself that money is a tool. It is something you use and sort of get away from the emotional side of it and think like, okay, I lost a client. How much money did I lose, and how much money do I need, and what are my goals, and how can I fund that, just so I can think about it in a more rational way. So a big part of it overall has been me just thinking of money as a tool, as something that is to be used, not a goal, not an enemy, just a tool.
Right. Well, I hope that the Inspired Money listener will pick up a copy of Get Money and get money by increasing their money, but also understand their money and realize that it's a tool. I mean, you really pack a lot of information, I think, into your book and covering a lot of different topics and subjects, but keeping it all the while very practical and something that's easy to understand and with steps. It's not like, it's not just overwhelming. As you have mentioned several times today, it's about little wins, and because those little wins add up to bigger wins.
I'm glad to hear that, because that was, after you've been writing about money for a while, you sort of get lost in the weeds of it. And I really tried to write the book from the perspective of somebody who really doesn't know where to start. So I'm glad to hear that it's not super overwhelming and it's digestible.
Now, I like to ask all of our guests, how do you define success?
I have been thinking about this because you prompted me with this question before we scheduled the interview, and I've been thinking a lot about it. And I've realized that, like you said, there's outward success and there's inward success, right? And the outward success, I was very proud when I got the gig writing for the New York Times. I was very proud when my book came out. Those were sort of more than feeling successful. Those sort of made me feel like my success was validated in a way. For me, success, my definition of success and how I measure it is really about the process. Am I enjoying doing what I do on a day-to-day basis? Do I feel fulfilled in my life with what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis? And granted, there are some days where I am not enjoying what I'm doing, But for the most part, I feel successful because I feel like I get to do something that I do enjoy and does make me feel fulfilled daily. And I think you don't even you don't have to work to do that. I think even if you're a stay-at-home dad or you're a stay-at-home mom, you can feel successful if you are, raising your children the way you want to. You're teaching your kids important lessons. Like those things can make you feel like a success. So I really think success is not even necessarily a work concept for me. It's more just, do I like what I'm doing every day? Do I feel good about what I'm doing every day? If I can say yes to that for the most part, then I feel successful.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. You think you'd feel fulfilled and happy just writing for an audience of one or two?
Yeah, because I did. When I was first starting out, I was working at a 9-to-5 job, and I felt like I was making good money. I felt like my family was very proud of me, but I didn't necessarily feel successful in what I was doing in my 9-to-5. But after work, I was writing on my blog, and I was writing short stories for my friends, and my audience was probably one or two people, but I still felt fulfilled. And I was pursuing all the while, saving that money and pursuing this second career that I wanted to have. And so even then, yeah, I would say like I feel just as much of a success now. Like I've written for the New York Times, I've written for Glamour, I've written for print. I feel just as successful now as I did back then almost, because I'm still doing what I enjoy and finding a way to do what I enjoy,
Right. So that's key. Even though the social media metrics that you mentioned, they're nice vanity metrics and they do make you feel good in the short term, but ultimately they're not that important.
Yes. And I love that phrase, vanity metrics. That's great.
Exactly
what it is.
Now, do you have any inspired money tip that you can share with the listeners that have had a big impact on your life?
I would really just go back to gratitude. As corny as it sounds, gratitude is almost a tool in and of itself to help you feel more in control of your life and feel better about what you have so that you can feel good about pursuing other things. It's sort of a tool for productivity, really, because when you are grateful for what you have, it's just so much easier to go out there and get more and ask for more. Because you know that you can take that risk and life is still going to be pretty good. And you know that it's not about, you're not focused on, well, I don't have this thing, so I need to go out and get more. You're focused on, hey, life is pretty good and I'm going to go out there and get even more of it. Not an easy thing to do, I know. But I really think just as simple as it is, just making a list of a few things you're grateful for every day can really change your perspective.
Yeah, it is all about perspective. It's funny how big an impact just your perspective can be. And it goes to show that we're oftentimes our own worst enemy, because that's what it's all about, right? It's about framing it so that your perspective is like a positive one and not dwelling on the negative.
Exactly. And along those lines, someone actually gave me this tip too a while back. They said that helped them kind of get over that, oh, I don't have enough mindset, which was they give money away. So like if they can help somebody out, they will cut back on whatever thing that they like to spend money on. I keep using restaurants as an example because that's all I can think of because it's my biggest splurge.
I like your style.
But they'll cut back on restaurants so that they can have money to give to an organization that's meaningful to them, or a public radio station or public television or their church or whatever. And they said that just the act of giving makes me feel happy. It makes me feel and powerful. Like I can give, I can do good. And it sort of also takes the negative connotations away from money and shows you money can be a good thing. You can use it for good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kristin, for sharing your story and your book with us today. Where can the listener find and follow you and learn more about the work that you do and your book, Get Money?
I am at KristinWong.com. That's Kristin with an I and a K.
Awesome. And you know what? We didn't even talk about your YouTube channel. People should check out your YouTube channel too, which I love your handle, by the way.
Yeah, my handle on all social media is The Wild Wong, which is my last name. Wong, not Wild. But yeah, and I have a YouTube channel where I just give money tips and I talk about the freelance life and writing tips and all that good stuff. So if you have time, check it out.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking money, Kristin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, all right. What was your favorite inspired money moment? I like how Kristin identified her passion for writing early and that she's willing to try different things. Today, she's a freelancer, author, and entrepreneur, which means that she's working for herself. Kristin mentioned gratitude more than once, so I'm going with gratitude to highlight. She even called it a tool to productivity and gave an exercise to write a list of things that you're thankful for every day. I don't know about you, but I'm willing to try. If you had a different favorite inspired money moment and takeaway than me, let me know at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Let's continue the conversation there. All the music on today's show is by Jim Kimo West. Aloha, Kimo. I'm told that podcasts spread by word of mouth, so please tell a friend about Inspired Money. It'd mean a lot, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have an inspired week, and do something that scares you.